All right, those of you that are watching, if you ever see me start to talk and not have clicked the record button, let me know. I appreciate it. Or in fact, as soon as I start talking, just remind me or ask me, did you click the record button? Because it usually happens maybe once or twice a semester. I forget to record something. And I mean, it's not a tragedy. I usually go back to a previous semester's lecture, but you know, I do like continuity. All right, we're going to spend more time talking about Razor pages and specifically the way that the Razor page and the code behind file, using maybe more proper terms, the view and the controller talk to each other and work together to present a web page. And I thought, I don't know what technology Amazon uses, all right? But if you notice, if you visit different products for Amazon, you'll notice that there's very definitely a template that is followed. So I just pulled up these pair of shoes just for the fun of it. And notice what we have. We have an image. We actually have multiple images. We have the name of the product. We have price, size, color, some features about the product, some other suggested items which are similar, some more information about the product, a product description, product details, customer reviews, and so on, the ratings, where you can look at the ratings. I always, by the way, look at the 1-star ratings, because sometimes people give a product 1 star for the pettiest reasons. So I usually look at maybe the high ratings to see what they said, but I also look at the 1-star ratings just to see, like, let's see what they say about these. Purchase these shows, I worn them 10 times. Wearing of the front saw started to break apart. I started tripping. Oh, well, that's not good. Okay, maybe these are credible, credible complaints about it. But sometimes the complaints are pretty petty. The bottom line is, if we were to go to another products page, like let's go to these. It's the exact same format. It's the exact same template as the Sperry shoes. It's just filled in with different data. We have our list of pictures here. We have our main picture. We have the name of the product, the price, a size. This apparently doesn't have a color. There's only one. Well, there's 2 choices of colors here you can choose, but it's not a drop down. There's some pictures, similar products. Excuse me, product description, product details, and other stuff. I apologize for yawning. I had a kind of big sandwich for lunch, and I got real sleepy immediately after lunch. And I went to Starbucks because they are reopening today on campus. But apparently they're not reopening today completely, because all they had was their really sweet drinks that they have, not coffee, but other kinds of drinks. And I can't believe that a Starbucks can be open and not have coffee. I mean, it kind of boggles the mind. But anyhow, I wasn't able to get coffee. So you might see me yawn a few times. I'll try to keep it to a minimum. All right. Bottom line is, as we go from product to product, we'll notice that the basic layout is the same. And in fact, if we go to really different products, we'll see the same format. So it's not just shoes. I mean, other products have similar consistency in the way it's laid out. Not to mention the fact that there's a consistent navigation up here. These are apparently in the fashion section, so the sub-navigation is consistent between other items in the fashion section, and so on. So let's talk about this in regards to server-side scripting, which we talked about, and specifically Razor pages. Now we know in server-side scripting that the web page is not created sitting out there waiting for the user to click on it. What's out there is a script, a program, a recipe for creating a web page. And that web page interacts with the database to get the information, price, names of images, so on, and puts together on the fly a HTML document specific for the item that you requested. What item, how do you know what item is requested? It's contained somewhere in the URL. I wouldn't doubt this is probably the product code for it. But the bottom line is there's code out there that takes this, retrieves values from the database, and creates an HTML file that gets sent back. That's true of all server-side scripting. Now, specific to Razor pages, we have the process sort of split into two different files or two different codes. We have the Razor page itself, the CSS_HTML file, and we have the CSS_HTML.cs file. We would call this the view, and we would call this the controller. Again, we talked about this before. This is similar to the model view controller format, except every page has its own controller instead of every model having its own controller. So what is the different jobs of these? The CSS_HTML file is the view. It is the template in HTML that is going to get filled in by stuff that comes from the controller. All right. I have a little game I'm going to show you in a minute. And the rules of the game and the implementation of the game is all handled in the CS file. But you make your choices in the game. You click the button. It runs your choices, tells you if you won or lost, updates your score. Okay. This one doesn't have any database interactivity. But thinking ahead, about a week or two, this is where our database retrieval is going to be. Instead of the logic for the game, this will be the manner in which we access the database and pull data from it. So this will be, that CS file will be where all the data is retrieved and organized to be made available for the view to display it. So in the CSS_HTML file, we have basic HTML code with a couple extra things potentially in it. This is the first thing. This identifies the model associated with this page, which is usually going to be the same name, all right, with Razor pages. Here we set the title of it. We've defined it as a page and so on. All right. Also in this, we have these things that start with an @ sign. Wherever you see something starting with an @ sign, that's a variable that is declared within the model. So model balance is I'm sorry, not the model, yeah, I guess the model. This is more of a controller, but yeah, we'll call it the model. That's the terminology they're using. Any data that we have that starts with an @ is data that's pulled from the model. And by the model, I mean the CS file. I was calling that a controller, which it sort of is, but they're using the terminology model, so we'll stick with that terminology. So this is something that comes from the model. How do I know that? It starts with an @ sign and the word model. Where is that declared? That's declared in the model as an instance variable. All right, as an instance variable. Oh, wait a minute. No, that's not where it is. That's where it's used there. Here is declared. It's declared public so that other page can have access to it. The Razor page itself, the view, the CSS243 file, has access to it. So it's declared as an instance variable, as an attribute, as a property of this high-low model class. And because it's declared as that, we can use it over here. Now, if I were to say points instead of balance, for example, I can't type, but if we were to say points instead of that, we get the dreaded red squiggly because there's nothing in the model declared as an instance variable or as a property called points. Now, I'm going to make a few comments as far as styling your code. I don't mean CSS code, I mean formatting your code. Have all of your properties declared at the very beginning of the class. You can actually declare a property down here if you wanted to. That makes it very confusing to debug and to read the code if you do that. Have all your properties together by themselves at the top of the page. Or the top of the class, rather. So now we change that back to balance, and everything is okay. All right, there's the balance again. Notice that the balance is in a hidden form field. All right. Here we have a section. Its class is result class. All right, we'll talk about how that's done in a minute. And we might look at a better way to do this. We have these images, and the name of the image is put right there within the source attribute. The values of D1 and D2 are also in there. So these are all attributes. These are all attributes in our model that we're going to be filling in and displaying the data on the page. Now we've given some of these things default values. I've given that results class a value of first time. I've declared tag as H1. I've declared balance as 100. We'll look at what I did with the tag in a minute here. What I want to demonstrate in this example is we can put that at model.something anywhere we want to within the HTML. Okay? So let's watch this. Let's notice how it behaves, and we'll come back and take another view of it and make sure that we understand what's going on. So I run this. This is a very simple game. I wanted to write like a very simple game, so I looked up like simple dice games or dice games for kids or something like that. And this game is called High-Low. And with High-Low, you have two die. You have a pair of dice that you roll. Each dice can be, of course, the values of 1 through 6. Any Dungeons and Dragon fans, these are not D20s or anything like that. These are just plain old regular Yahtzee dice. All right, so you roll those. You get a number from 1 to 6 on each of them. And you have to predict if the sum of the two die are in the low range, in the high range, or exactly 7. All right. Little basic probability tells you that 7 is the most likely combination to roll on a pair of dice. there's actually a 1 out of 6 chance that you roll a 7. All right. Low is defined as anything below 7. So 2 through 6 is considered to be low. So 2 would be 2 ones up through 6. And anything above 7, 8 through 12 is considered to be high. So if I go this game, here we go. I have my balance of 100. I get to pick what I want, whether I want low, high, or 7. I'm going to gamble and pick 7. Now, this assumes that there's 1 point on a line each roll. All right, so each roll is 1 point. If you get it right, if you pick low or high and you get it correct, you win that point. Otherwise, you lose that point. If you pick 7 incorrect, you get 4 points. And if you lose 1 point. So they pay you bigger odds for picking a 7. Now, like all betting games, the odds are stacked against you, right? Because you're getting paid 4 to 1 on a 7, and the odds, the odds of rolling it are 1 out of 6. Likewise, your odds of rolling a 2 through 6 are, let me do some mental mathematics, 30 out of 36, 15 out of 36, or 5 out of 12. So you're slightly less than 50-50 chance of rolling a low or a high, yet they're paying you even money. So the odds are stacked against you. If you play this long enough, you're going to lose. All right. So I'm going to gamble though. I'm going to go with 7. I roll. I selected 7. I rolled a 9. So I'm a loser. Boy, that's kind of harsh. I must have been in a bad mood when I wrote that. Let's say I pick high this time. Yep. Say I pick low this time. All right, I finally won. Go for 7 again. Nope. 7, and I got it. Oh no, I picked low. I thought I had clicked on 7. Oh no, I missed my opportunity. Oh well. All right, so let's talk about how this works. All right, and I want to go through, I want to run this again. So we start off from scratch and show you what code is getting hit. So I run this. I click on the link. I get a page that shows me a drop down, a play button, and a balance of 100. I don't have a pair of dice appearing. I don't have, whether I'd won or lost the last round or whatever. So when I initially go to this page, I am doing a GET request. Now, there is no on-GET request in here. I could have put one in, but I didn't. All right. If I put an on-GET request, I could default the balance to 100. I could default the results class to first time, and so on down the line. But I didn't. This is another way to doing it, by defaulting the values this way. I don't know which way is a better way. They both accomplish the same thing. But it would look like this if I was doing that. And I could say, I'm going to put these in comments. I could say balance equals 100. result class equals first time. The bottom line is when I access this code for the first time, either through the onGet or through setting the defaults for those variables are going to have their default values. And the ones I'm interested in are that results class and the H1. I'm sorry, not the H1, the 100. I was looking at the H1 and thinking of the 100, so I came out H1 and the 100. So those default values. So what does that mean in our code? Well, all this gets displayed. The balance gets put as a hidden field, and we'll see why we do that in a minute. We have our button. We display in a paragraph the balance from the model. So that's how we get this. Play balance 100 because we've initialized that value to 0. There's a hidden field if we look at the HTML. With a value of 100. All right. Now, what is the business with the model results class? Well, if I look at the CSS for this, where is the CSS for this? Well, remember that the CSS is part of the layout file. The layout file is the first part of the page. Remember our page here, part of this code comes from the layout CSS_HTML page, and part of it comes from the high-low CSS_HTML page. In fact, where it says render page or render body, that's where we pop in the code that gets generated from this CSS_HTML. Now, if we look further, this has a CSS file called high-low styles in the web server's root. Oh, I must have put it in here. I did. So we don't actually need this one. All right. We notice that that has a value. First time has a value of display none. Post back has a value of block. So first time says don't display it. So if we set the style of this section, we set the class to first time, that means that on the initial load of the page, this is going to be invisible. Why do we do that? Well, because we don't have images yet. The dice haven't rolled yet. The user hasn't made a choice yet, so we're not going to have a user choice yet. We can't say if you won or lost because you haven't played yet. So therefore, we simply hide this. If we didn't hide this, what we'd get is the first time we loaded the page, would get a couple of broken image tags, would get text that didn't have some of the blanks filled in. So because of that, and let me show you what I mean. Let me eliminate this. Demonstrate what it is. User selected, blank, 2 broken images, dice rolled values are. That's ugly, all right? We don't have results yet because we haven't played the game yet. So why don't we just hide those results the first time through? And that's what this accomplishes. Because on the first time through, on the initial load, the results class is going to be first time. And we're going to set the display property of that section to none. The second time through, guess what? We're going to set the results class to post back. And that will cause that section to be displayed as a block tag. So you have to write a rock, paper, and scissors game. You might want to do something like this to avoid ugly things the first time the game is played, the first time you pull up that page. All right, so the default value of 100, again, that we've defined, we could either define in the onGet or initialize a variable that way. That gets put into our page in the appropriate spots. And we have a page that looks like this. Now, after we've played once, then we get the actual values. And I'm going to quit while I'm ahead because I have 104. I rolled a 7 and I predicted a 7 right off. So how does this work? How does it work when we post back? Well, when we post back, we are calling the onPost method. And we're going to pull values from the form in order to do our processing. User choice is the value that we've chosen from the form. And our choices are low, 7, or high. That's the select has a name of user choice. So therefore, this is how we access the thing on the form that has the name user choice. We grab from that hidden field, because a hidden field goes just like a regular form field does. So that hidden field is a way to pass and keep track of the balance so that it's a running balance and it doesn't reinitialize to 100 each time. So we're grabbing the value that the balance used to be. We create our random object and we roll the dice 2 times. We generate a number between 1 and just below 7. So between 1 and 6.9 repeating. And then we do our test. D is the value of the first die. D2 is the value of the second die. If the user selected low, and the value of the sum of those was less than 7, then they won. And their balance is incremented by 1. Otherwise, they have lost and their balance is decremented by 1. Notice I have these as standalone if statements. Each one is an if statement. Well, those ifs are mutually exclusive. I'm only going to hit the true on one of these if statements. The reason I didn't nest them is because nesting can get complicated. Yes, if I chose low, the machine's going to have to evaluate if I chose 7 or if I chose high, even though it can't be true. But so what? That tiny bit of extra processing time is not worth the confusion in the code by nesting if statements. So we have that block for each thing. So if I pick 7 and it is 7, my balance is incremented by 4, otherwise it's decremented by 1. We picked high and it is high, we get incremented by 1, otherwise decremented by 1. Now here's the thing. I'm forming the name of the image by taking the letter D, putting in the value of the first die, .jpg. And let's look at the CSHTML. The CSHTML says in images, put the value of that variable after home directory /images. So you might expect, and you'd be right, that if we look in the web root of this site /images, you'll see D1 through D6. So the first part of this name comes from being hard-coded. We know they're in the images folder. The second part comes from the value of the variable that got generated. And finally, we go and display that, and we display the results. And we get a page that looks like that, or looks like whatever we had. Are there any questions up to this point? Okay. One thing I did want to point out, remember that strings are objects. And with objects, you don't say object 1 equals object 2. You use the equals method. Specifically with strings, you'd say if the string variable dot equals and then have the other string value. I can, I'm not really going to go into detail why that is. It deals with those of you that take my Java class or will be taking it. It deals the difference between an object reference variable and a primitive. So it's better to use the equals rather than just doing the equal signs. With integers, those are primitives. So I can just use, I could use the equal sign like that. Of course, it's a double equal sign. How do I know if something's a primitive or an object? If the type is lowercase, it's a primitive. If the type is uppercase, it's an object. I think it's complaining about these because I haven't given default values. I could either give a default value or declare it as nullable. I'm putting a little question mark here after that. Gets rid of my warning. Now here's the question. And this question sometimes can be difficult to answer when you're dealing with code that includes random number generation. So like with games, with most games where there's some kind of randomness built into them. The question is how do you test this thoroughly to make sure it works? Here's my thought on it. There's actually 9 possibilities. Now, this is in this particular case. In other cases, we might be able to figure out a better way. User pick and what actually got rolled. I could pick low and the actual roll is a low. I could pick low and the actual roll is 7. I could pick low and the actual roll is high. I could pick 7 and the actual roll is low. Roll is low. I could pick 7 and the actual roll is 7. I could pick 7 and the actual roll is high. I could pick high and the actual roll is low. I could pick 7. Oh no, high again. My mistake. And the actual row is 7. I could pick high and the actual row is high. I would play this game over and over until I checked that each one of these worked the way that I expected it to. It shouldn't take forever, but by the same token, don't simply run it once and say, hey, it works. Now, one thing that you can do sometimes especially if you have other classes involved, is you can write little unit tests for the classes to make sure that those are functioning. So for example, if I took that logic that I have for the game and put it in its own class, I could maybe write a unit test that would run and generate automatically. Instead of randomly generating, I could generate the results that I wanted and make sure that the programmer responded correspondingly. One thing I want to emphasize in this class is testing. All right. Testing is something that not all developers do a great job at. And you kind of have to take a very systematic approach to testing in order to thoroughly test your code. And don't simply run it through one or two iterations and say, yep, it works, and be done with it. If you think about most bugs in a program, you know, most of the time problems with software isn't that it breaks every single time. That's kind of rare. What usually is a problem is under certain circumstances. All right. I had a game that froze up anytime I was trying to create a character. All right. Didn't freeze up all the time. Froze up when I create a character. All right. And specifically when I created a character and I already had a certain number of files stored within the game. So that caused things to blow up. Which means that the developers for that never tested that scenario where I'm trying to create a character and I have a high number of files already stored. So you want to try to anticipate every possible case that you can and test for it. Are there any other questions about this? Now, where do we go through from here? Let's do a preview of, or actually, let's talk about your assignment. Let's do that instead of doing a preview of next week. Next week will come soon enough. You have to do a rock, paper, scissors game. All right. So, what's your screen going to look like when the page initially loads? What's the screen going to look like after you've played around and each subsequent round? Well, there's going to be some mechanism to make the user's choice. Could be a drop down. Could be 3 images that you click on, a radio button. Could be any number of ways, but you're going to have the option to pick one of the 3 possibilities. And then you're going to have a button to go and do the calculation or go and play the game. That's what it's going to look like initially. Now, after you've played it, you're going to still have that option, however you choose to represent the options. But you're going to have whether what you played, what the computer chose, and the results. Did you win, lose, or draw? So that's in a nutshell what the CSS HTML page is going to look like. These are things that are going to come from your code behind, from your .cs file. Your .cs file then will have variables for each of these things, public variables for each of these things. You might even, by the way, instead of putting in you played a rock or you played paper, you might have an image of those things. Make your code look a little nicer. And I do have to say, those of you that completed, I graded week 1's assignment, you guys did a really good job on that. Did a really good job making your code and pages look professional. So keep that momentum going in this one. And make it like, you know, you've seen games before. You've seen simple games on the internet, and you could imagine simple games for kids that they might like playing. Try to make the presentation look appropriate for what you're doing. So you're going to have variables for all those things, and you're then going to have the logic in your code behind file on post that's going to evaluate the user's choice, randomly choose something for the computer, and then do a series of if statements that will tell you if they won or not, and then display the results. Again, I would do a similar test matrix for this. I would run it, pick rock the first time. Wait until the computer generates the 3 other choices and see if you get the right results. Then play paper. Play it through until the computer generates all 3 of its possibilities. Then pick scissors and then play that. One thing that's not necessary is for you to create another class for this. You can put all your code in the CS file, the model for this particular page. It's important for you to sort of understand how those 2 pages are glued together. So before we get into database stuff, which will happen next week, okay, I lied and I am going to give a preview next week. Before we get into the database stuff, it's important that you understand how these pages communicate with each other, how they talk, how they get called, and so on. Next week will be largely what I hope to be a database review. We're going to develop some, we're going to do the same sort of thing, except instead of our code file, our CS file, the model, being something simplistic like some basic game logic, it's going to be accessing data from the databases. And we're going to do this in a way maybe different than you've done in other classes, if you've done this in other classes. But before we do that, we want to make sure we understand basic database terminology, that sort of thing. Are there any questions? All right, that's all I had for today. If you run into questions, don't hesitate to ask. We will see you next week. Thank you.